Menlo and Anthropic announce a new $100 million fund for companies building on Claude. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief Headlines Edition, all the daily AI news you need in around 5 minutes. We kick off today with kind of a fun one from Menlo and Anthropic. The companies have announced that they are partnering on a new $100 million fund, which will support companies that are building on Claude. Menlo partner Didi Das writes, "Today we're launching the $100 million Anthology Fund, an Anthropic and Menlo Ventures partnership to fund seed and Series A's as the next generation of AI startups around the world with unique benefits. Startups get $25,000 of Anthropic credits, access to Anthropic AI models, quarterly deep dives with the Anthropic team, biannual demo days hosted by Anthropic Chief Product Officer Mike Krieger, as well as Anthropic's co-founders, credits from other Menlo Ventures portfolio companies, and more. When it comes to particular thesis areas or startup themes, Didi writes that they're not as much focused on that, and instead says that it's, quote, more about attracting high-quality, ambitious builders and fueling them with the right resources. Interestingly, they say that you don't have to be using Claude to be in the Anthology Fund, but presumably the goal for Anthropic is through these credits and through this access to push people naturally in that direction, which I think is a smart play. I think people will get there. Lastly, this is actually available as an application rather than a traditional pitch process. So if you go to menlovc.com, you can learn more about the fund and access the application. Next up, we move over to the controversial. A new report says that, quote, AI models at Apple, Salesforce, Anthropic, and other major technology players were trained on tens of thousands of YouTube videos without the creator's consent and potentially in violation of YouTube's terms. Basically, the dataset in question here is called the Pile. It's a collection by a nonprofit called Eleuther AI that was, as described by Ars Technica, put together as a way to offer a useful dataset to individuals or companies that don't have the resources to compete with big tech. One of the sources for the Pile are YouTube captions that are collected by the YouTube's Captions API, scraped from over 173,000 videos. Marques Brownlee tweeted, "Apple has sourced data for their AI from several companies. One of them scraped tons of data and transcripts from YouTube videos, including mine. Apple technically avoids quote-unquote fault here because they're not the ones scraping, but this is going to be an evolving problem for a long time." And the opinions here are complex. On the one hand, there is a sense among many that training without consent is some sort of a violation, even if it's a new type of violation, but others aren't so sure. Darknet Diaries creator Jack Reisiter writes, "I optimize for this. I want maximum visibility into my show. We've historically called this SEO, but I want it to go much further. I want my content to inspire articles, books, newsletters, YouTube videos, podcasts, and more. I'm here to make an impact." Micah Berkeley responded to Marques saying, "Didn't you once say you use GPT when it comes to your content? Which is crazy because the tool that is helping you needs to have knowledge of how the game works. The let me use your expertise for my project but just don't use my content is wild to me. Deep scanning Google Docs and scraping your website for information is different. But literally reading the transcript of your exceptionally promoted content out in the public, I believe, makes it fair use." And I think the biggest takeaway from that, even if you disagree with the specifics, is that ultimately this will come down to lines and gray areas. What's more, this is ultimately both a society-level question around norms and what people think is acceptable, as well as ultimately a question that I believe will go to the highest levels of the Supreme Court when it comes to how AI and fair use interact. Then again, even as that is being figured out, some people are taking matters into their own hands. The Los Angeles Times reports that a hacker group says it leaked Disney data because of the company's approach to AI. A self-proclaimed hacktivist group known as Nullbridge told a set of media outlets, including CNN, that it had gotten access to Disney's internal messaging channels, and from that leaked roughly 1.2 terabytes of information. Recently, they said that they leaked this internal communication due to the company's handling of, quote, artist contracts, its approach to AI, and its pretty blatant disregard for the consumer. Nullbridge says that it is a group, quote, protecting artists' rights and ensuring fair compensation for their work. So now we have hackers involved in this discussion as well. Recently, we talked a little bit about Microsoft's hiring of Inflection AI and their potential mandate around AI agents. And of course, we've talked about the fact that their approach to how they got Inflection AI staff to come over was seemingly a way to try to get around antitrust rules. However, that hasn't stopped it from triggering probes, the latest of which is from the UK. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority has officially opened up an investigation into Microsoft around their hiring of the Inflection AI staff. The CMA now has until September 11th to decide whether or not it would go to the next level of a more in-depth investigation. In terms of model launches, Mistral announced a couple new models that have become available, so I expect to hear more about those soon. And lastly, Andrej Karpathy, formerly of both Tesla and OpenAI, has announced a new AI education company called Eureka Labs. This is deserving of a much larger episode, and we will probably do a full episode on it at some point. But for now, let's just read Andrej's announcement piece. He writes, "We at Eureka Labs are building a new kind of school that is AI native. How can we approach an ideal experience for learning something new? For example, in the case of physics, one could imagine working through very high-quality course materials together with Feynman, who is there to guide you every step of the way. Unfortunately, subject matter experts who are deeply passionate, great at teaching, infinitely patient, and fluent in all the world's languages are also very scarce and cannot personally tutor all 8 billion of us on demand. However, with recent progress in generative AI, this learning experience feels tractable. The teacher still designs the course materials, but they are supported, leveraged, and scaled with an AI teaching assistant who is optimized to help guide the students through them. This teacher plus AI symbiosis could run an entire curriculum of courses on a common platform. If we are successful, it will be easy for anyone to learn anything, expanding education in both reach and extent. Andrew goes on to say that their first course will be LLM 101, an undergraduate level course that guides the student through training their own AI. And perhaps most interestingly, he says, Eureka Labs is the culmination of my passion in both AI and education for over 2 decades. He said, all of my work combining the two so far has only been part-time, as side quests to my quote-unquote real job. So I'm quite excited to dive in and build something great professionally and full-time. It is pretty awesome to see someone of Andre's caliber bringing the full force of his attention to education, and I think it will be very exciting to see what they build. For now, though, that is going to do it for the headlines. Up next, the main episode.